Welcome to Patchwork Worship, virtual Patchwork Worship. I'm Jill Heminger. I'm a member of the Patchwork community and have been for a long time. This is very awkward, but I'll do my best. This is the fifth Sunday of Lent, and as a lot of you know, this is a community of people who gather informally for Sunday evening service, and each service is different depending on who is leading. It's a little unusual that I'm doing it, but every now and then I do. So bear with me. My husband Bill and I offered to do that this week, and we have planned it to be an evening of meaningful music and eclectic readings, so that as we gather together virtually and apart, we can be together in spirit. You'll have to, we're going to begin with Spirit of Gentleness. I know you don't have your songbooks, so you'll just have to see how well you can remember words to some of these familiar songs. Actually, maybe I'll read the first.
Let me play.
I'll read you the first verse so you can kind of remember the words to this. Spirit, spirit of gentleness, blow through the wilderness, calling and free. Spirit, spirit of restlessness, stir me from placidness, wind, wind on the sea. I think I'll let you remember the verses on your own. The first reading that I will share with you is Psalm 130. Louder, okay. I will read Psalm 130. My soul waits for the Lord. Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. O Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my pleas for mercy. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? But with you there is forgiveness, that you may be feared. I wait for the Lord, my soul waits, and in his word I hope. My soul waits for the Lord, more than watchmen for the morning, more than watchmen for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is a steadfast love, and with him is plentiful redemption, and he will redeem Israel from all his iniquities. This is a reading from Life Prayers that I've had this book for many years, and there's a lot of meaningful prayers in this one. Make sure I'm reading the right thing. When sorrow comes, let us accept it simply as a part of life. Let the heart be open to pain. Let it be stretched by it. All the evidence we have says that this is the better way. An open heart never grows bitter, or if it does, it cannot remain so. In the desolate hour, there is an outcry, a clenching of the hands upon emptiness, a burning pain of bereavement, a weary ache of loss. But anguish, like ecstasy, is not forever. There comes a gentleness, a returning quietness, a restoring stillness. This too is a door to life. Here also is a deepening of meaning, and it can lead to dedication, a going forward to the triumph of the soul, the conquering of the wilderness. And in the process will come a deepening inward knowledge that in the final reckoning, all is well. Our next song is going to be Lone Wild Bird, which, if you have the song, but if you have your songbook, it's on page 33. I'll read the words to that too, and you'll hear it twice. The lone wild bird in lofty flight is still with thee, nor leaves thy sight. And I am thine, I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me. The ends of earth are in thy hand, the sea's dark, deep, and far-off land. And I am thine, I rest in thee. Great Spirit, come and rest in me. We played the first time, I'll play the second time.
I'm making an introduction, you go with this melody for the first time.
That's the first time. Okay.
And then I'm going to play the second time with embellish.
Okay.
Here comes, it's all nine.
I understand that I am not speaking loud enough, so I will try from here on in. And actually, the next thing that I have here is not me speaking, but Bill. And Bill is going to read very loudly, I guess is the right word. Yes.
Okay, we're doing a level now. Is this going to be loud enough?
It's hard to say.
It's hard to say. Well, that's as loud as I'm going to get. So there.
Make it as loud as you can.
Okay. This is a poem by the current poet laureate of the state of Ohio, who happens to be a great friend of Jill's sister, and therefore our friend too. And she has a wonderful book which won the award called Blackbird. And this is a poem called Subdural Hematoma. And it's kind of important now in a time when we're all so worried about our health for good reason. And here's a surprisingly positive outcome from that. So here's the poet, Laura Grace Weldon. Squeezed into pain's tight grip, my son finally agrees to an ER visit where images of his brain's convoluted architecture show it pushed aside by blood's gleaming fist. Seated in waiting room furniture, thickly layered with other people's prayers, we pass time knuckled and blank while neurosurgeons saw open his skull. I think of a girl who fell 10,000 feet from a broken plane into Peru's jungle. Tightly clustered trees cushioned her, their limbs breaking to set her on the forest floor, still safely strapped in her seat. Wearing white sandals and a frilly dress, she walked along a stream 11 days to find rescuers. At first, those men feared she might be a river ghost. I want to strap my own son in so miraculous a seat, drop him in a current where time rushes backward before a guy late for his shift at a donut shop makes an illegal left turn, before my son's helmet hits the car, before my son's body skids down the pavement, before vessels begin leaking into the dear familiar head I first glimpsed in the birthing room. Benjamin wakes, blue eyes watery against ghostly pale skin, map of a dark river etched deep across his forehead. He turns to us, jesting, no brain damage, to let us know he's out of the jungle.
Two miracles in that poem. I think our next song is going to be Lord of All Hopefulness, and it's on page 34.
Are you going to play?
Yeah.
You play. I'll give an intro, you play, and then I'll do the second verse all by myself.
Who's giving the intro?
Yeah, I'll give a little bit.
Okay. And now we come to a time for speaking of gifts, and then perhaps at some point, more than virtually, giving gifts. For Patchwork continues, of course, to need help continuing the good work that happens here. But are there any gifts that anybody is mentioning right now on Facebook?
We're on a bit of a delay, so wait just a moment, but I'm not seeing it yet.
Well, I think it's a gift, although it's a little scary, being here to be with all of you. I wish we could all see each other. It would be wonderful. But Bill's poem was a gift of miracles mentioned in two ways. I have the gift of having a sister. I mean, this is a concern, but my sister Linda has been recently diagnosed with multiple myeloma, but the good news is that she's feeling no symptoms really, but she did start chemo here recently. And I guess I jumped into concerns as well, but are there gifts that are mentioned on the Facebook page?
Sean lifts up the gift of you.
Oh, Sean lifts up the gift of me. Thank you, Sean. That's it. That's
So
it.
far.
Okay, so far, okay.
Maybe more will come in if I play.
Well, no, you're doing Chopin. I did think of a couple things. So,
Beautiful sunshine,
beautiful sunshine,
gift of the dogwood blooming.
and the dogwood and the red bud and many other things are blooming. Beautiful day today. Also a gift of being able, some of us, to go out to see Alan Winslow at Solarbron. We were trying to keep our 6 feet apart, and we're somewhat successful in that. But the people at the nursing home were able to bring Alan down to the courtyard, and he could see all of us waving to him and holding up signs that Anitra made. So that was a real gift earlier this week. Any more, John?
Not that I'm seeing yet.
All right, well, now we have another gift of music, and this is Bill playing Chopin. Is it a...
Nocturne.
It's a nocturne.
Are you gonna do that?
Yep. Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
Now it is the time to lift up our prayers of concern, and there are just so many that are jumbling through my head right now, and I have a feeling that many of us feel the same way. I thought maybe instead of me trying to name those right now, you know, the COVID-19 and you name it, let's just take just a couple of, 30 seconds maybe for all of us to focus on the things that you are thinking about. So please try to name them in your head if you would, and then I will continue with a few others. A minute ago, I mentioned the gift of being able to be or to somewhat be with Alan, but Alan is, of course, on our minds a lot, so prayers for Alan, just prayers for Alan, and that made me also think of Beth, who is at Walnut Creek, and maybe there's a possibility that someone could show this to Beth as well. There are many other people, and I think maybe John has a few to
Not
read.
yet. People lifted up a few other gifts. The gift of music that was just offered, and also the Alan has a gift, which you just mentioned.
Okay. I don't know if people could hear John, but the gift of music and the gift of Alan were mentioned as gifts. And I guess there's a little bit of a delay, but I was asking to see if anybody had specific prayer requests.
Amelia.
Definitely Nelia, who has been diagnosed with lung cancer, and it's stage 1, and I think she's feeling very positive about it, actually, her treatment plan.
I have some concerns. Can I read?
Yes.
Of course, we're all focused on the coronavirus and our attention to it and dealing with it, but at the same time, we have to recognize what I'm going to mention now. Our president has announced plans to spend taxpayer money on religious schools instead of fully funding public education. That's one. State legislatures in a number of states consider laws which include amendments to their state constitutions that bar access to reproductive health care for religious reasons. That would be 2. 3, the administration of the orange guy is cutting regulations to gut science-based protections for our environment, our water, and our air. And 4, the Supreme Court has agreed to rule on cases that could threaten the separation of church and state for years to come. And that's just a beginning, so I'm lifting these up.
And have any others come in, John?
No.
Okay. Well, I would just like to then lift up everyone who would be here if they possibly could be, and not just the people who come on Sunday nights, but the people who come to use the food pantry. We'll lift up those people, the people who come for hospitality every morning. Well, anybody else? Amy, John.
Families in our children's program.
Oh my goodness, yes, the families in our children's program and all the kids who are just not being able to continue their schooling as is much needed, really. So, okay. Now it's a time for John to step forward and.
Or do you want to do the music first?
Oh, yeah, we have a song first. Yes, thank you. I'm glad I gave you the plan. We're going to sing I Am the Bread of Life. And I'll read some words of that for you. Okay, maybe not.
I don't hear it.
Just read it from
I
here.
just had it. I was going to play it too.
Well, yeah, you need to play it.
Yeah. All right. Hang on, everyone. It's over here. You got covered up. I am the bread of life. You who come to me shall not hunger, and who believe in me shall not thirst. No one can come to me unless the Father beckons, and I will raise you up, and I will raise you up, and I will raise you up on the last day.
Let's sing it first. Which one?
No, just go ahead. Yeah, that's Okay, that sounds good.
So Jill asked me to lead the communion portion of our virtual worship service here. And hearing those readings from Psalm 130 and from the prayer that Jill read earlier, thinking about the grief, crying to God from the pit, crying out in despair, crying out in grief. And this is a ritual that was born out of grief. It was born out of the grief of a group of friends gathering for the last time. It was born out of the anticipatory grief of Jesus dying. We are in the midst of a time of great grief. We have lost so much. We've lost social and physical connection with each other. We've lost peace of mind about so many things. We are grieving. We are anticipating that we will be grieving more because there will be more and more loss. We know that the curve has not peaked yet. And so we are in that pit of despair and crying out. And not to sugarcoat anything or deny the gravity of the situation, that second prayer that Jill read, it will not last forever. Darkness is not eternal. There is light. There is a new dawn. It doesn't mean there won't still be pain. It doesn't mean that there still won't be even more grief. But Jesus knew this, and he gave us this ritual to say, my body's going to be broken. It's going to be broken and crumbled up and bones crushed. My blood is going to be spilled. But that's not the end. There will be new life. There will be some form of resurrection that will come out of this. We can't see it yet, but it will come. And that is the spirit of this meal, that we are together, even when we're physically apart, that we are witnessing to each other's grief, and we are bearing each other's burdens of loss and sorrow as we go through this together. And we know that one day we will be able to come back together again physically. The world will probably look different. We'll have made all kinds of adjustments and changes, hopefully mostly for the better. But we know that new life will come. And so we take this bread and this cup, and I invite you now to take your own elements, whatever you can find in your kitchen. Piece of bread, cracker, whatever you got. Pour something into a cup. Wine, juice, milk, This is patchwork. You've been to these worship services. You know that we do communion lots of different ways. So take whatever you've got with you. And take a piece of your bread or cracker or whatever you've got and dip it in the cup and eat. Thank you for joining together in this communion service.
Thank you, John. And now I know how loudly I should have been speaking this whole time. That was wonderful. Thank you. I did, however, miss seeing one of Darlene's beautiful breads, or Neil's bread, too, that is so tasty. But the cracker worked tonight. Let's see. No, it's not. I have a reading first, Bill. Yeah. All right, so before we do our closing song, I do have a short reading from the same book. And there's no title to this one either, but I'll just read this as loudly as I can. Spiritual teachers and psychologists speak of the wisdom to be gained from traversing the arid terrain of hopelessness. Understanding our dark night as a spiritual descent and quest for freedom may offer some assurance in a difficult time. Certainly when despair grows within us, it may feel hard to pray, but pray is what we must do. Pray to give voice to our truth. Pray to avoid denial. Pray to remember that we are not the first, nor will we be the last, to know the dark night of the soul. Pray with faith that a miracle will be born not out of our own doing, but from the unconscious depths of our being. Our closing song is dedicated to Laura Weaver. This is, of course, what we call 606. Praise God, from whom all blessings flow. Okay, yeah. Get it set up here. All right. Thank you for joining us. Let the people say amen. For God. Let the people